violates the open meeting law.
Told that go through. He does.
He only deal in face.
Well fed.
We all set, folks? Everybody ready?
Ready.
Right on time. Good evening. I'd like to call to order the April 23rd meeting of the Falmouth Planning Board. The first thing on our agenda is the minutes of April 16th.
Mr. Chairman, I recommend approval of the minutes of April 16th, 2019 as corrected.
Second?
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
The next thing is public comment. This is open for anything that's not on our agenda tonight. Is there anyone here that would like to speak? I thought you might. Please come up. I was wondering why you're here.
And we have no idea who you are, so
We've never seen you before.
we've never seen you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Grant Walker, 71 Philadelphia Street, Precinct 3. Not a member of any town committee or board or anything, just a citizen here. But I went to FCTV and looked at the recent town meeting after the recent planning board meeting, just to check some things. And I thought it might be worth saying that there was only one person who spoke really in favor of that amendment to put in that phrasing from state law. Only one person, and there were several people other people who spoke. Not a single member of the Energy Committee spoke on that article at all, except for Rosemary Carey, who is a member, and all she said was that in spite of that amendment from that one person, the Energy Committee was in favor of the article. And so I'd mention that because in the last planning board meeting, I believe you announced that you would have a meeting with the Energy Committee. Not a member of the Energy Committee, but I know the members of the Energy Committee. And there was kind of a vague reference in the last planning board meeting to their talking points. But I thought therefore it might be worthwhile saying that I hope that meeting occurs soon. I hope it's a public meeting. I would very much like to attend that joint meeting. And if the article is in your heads regarding that Article 25 from town meeting, seems to me if the planning board looks at orientation of the roof load, location of the interconnection with the electrical utility company and shading and things like that, that's about all you have to do to encourage solar energy. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
If there's no one else, I'd just like to give you a brief update on that Energy Committee meeting.
While he's here, yet we're not debating anything,
I
but
know.
an update's good.
Okay.
Bring it on.
So I did email members of the Energy Committee, or the two who emailed me. I think that they reached out to me, Rosemary did. I apologize for not having a chance to extend the invitation and suggested that prior to us meeting, likely the end of May, that I might attend one of their meetings, and so we can sort of have sort of a session to, have some information to bring to the board. So I've offered to attend their meeting and have some discussion about some of those things we might bring back to this meeting, just to make it as efficient and as effective as possible. That was probably last night sometime, or the night before, so I have not heard. Today's Tuesday, so had it been last night. So at some point, we'll hear back from them, and I'll be attending an Energy Committee meeting and have some discussion in advance of our meeting with them.
Very good. Next thing on our agenda is applicant Woods Hole Partners. At this point, I will recuse myself and leave you in Pat's good hands.
Thank you. Okay, you've got several things in your package. One is the list that was handed out last time as to the still open items that we went over. And I asked Corey, could he please highlight that which has been taken care of? Corey, those are the yellow highlights, is that correct?
Excuse me,
Yes,
Those are the things that have been,
yes.
so all the other items have not been addressed yet?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so you can see that. Cory just handed out a letter dated today from our town engineer, James McLaughlin, who says that we have reviewed the April 16, 2019 correspondence from the applicant's consultant, Cape and Islands Engineering. We concur that the proposed drainage system complies with the town of Falmouth 25-year storm design. We do not concur with the remainder of the letter. And you will see that April 16th letter from Raul Lizardi Rivera, who was the site engineer. So you have all this information in front of you that you have not seen previously. And you have a draft decision. So, can I ask you to look at everything, please, since you have not seen it, and we'll just, yes,
So if I may,
yes, Tom.
as I mentioned, a week between meetings seems like a long time, but it isn't when you're trying to get these goodies done. So apologies for not having some of this information out to you prior to. In the conversations I had with Falmouth Engineering, and essentially Jim's letter, Jim McLaughlin, our town engineer, tells me that Falmouth Engineering cannot confirm that the stormwater will not be entering Mass DOT's roadway at the pre-development rate. Falmouth Engineering notes that Woods Hole Road is not in their jurisdiction, and absent any, if it was a town road, they basically wouldn't have deferred to Mass DOT. In the review letter, the reply, and I believe talking to engineering, the nature of this is, when you look at some of the comments on the April 16th letter that says, there is no need to revise the pre-development calculations. The drainage system is contained within the town, well, this is the bottom of page 1. There's no need to revise the pre-development calculations. Overall stormwater runoff volumes impacts will greatly reduce with the project as compared to the lack of drainage currently on the site. This pertains to coming down to towards the state highway. In the middle of page 2, there's no need to revise the pre-development calculations again, and a third. And then at the end of page 3, the drainage system as designed contains the town of Falmouth's stormwater volume. It's not required to produce additional calculations for infiltration into 72 hours. So our engineers, much like me, the abundance of caution, they want to make sure the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. So when they ask for some information and the engineer goes, well, I don't have to give you that. That was essentially the gist of their letter. Falmouth Engineering has confirmed that there will be no stormwater implications off the site onto private property. No, and everything is going to be contained on site. The thing they don't know is what's coming down the pike onto Woods Hole Road. As far as what that change, and chances are it's a fairly de minimis change, but they just can't tell you because they didn't have that information. I haven't seen too many letters like that, but Falmouth Engineering, our engineering division, has said, yeah, as designed, the system is going to be fine. With the exception, they don't know what the input of that is going to be, but at the same time, these folks are going to be going to Mass DOT for work in the right-of-way for the sidewalk. They have to confirm that the site distance is accurate and comports with that, and they basically said, we'll defer to Mass DOT on the site distance. And we'll be asking for a design for this jitney stop that we talked about, also for MassDOT, because what they said is get us the set of plans approved and approvals before MassDOT hops into that. So likely Mass DOT will be asking for that sort of information as well. But that's the gist of Jim McLaughlin's very short letter that says, the drainage system complies with the town of Falmouth's 25-year design storm, but they do not confer with the additional statements in the letter from Cape Engineering. Those other items that are open are those things where they have said in their review letter, and we can go through those specifically, where they defer to the planning board on some of those questions about parking spaces and things like that. So with that in mind, I just wanted to set the table for where we're at, and back to your point, if the board wants to take a minute just to kind of review what the discussion list is, then we can take it from there.
So is it true that you just said that the plan does comply with the Town of Falmouth 25-year storm design, and the rest, once we're finished with our site plan review, really MassDOT is going to be attending to? Is that the gist of what you said?
Correct. Because we have contained the stormwater, we have confirmed that the stormwater that's on the site will not be leaving onto anyone else's property at a rate post-development. The way stormwater works is that the rate of stormwater is to be the same after things are developed as before their development. Your post-development calculations have to be equal to your pre-development calculations, because you cannot flood somebody out and you cannot starve water from them. So that water leaving the site has to be the same. If there was an issue before where someone got way too much water, well, officially you're not allowed to do them a solid by saying, oh, we'll handle some of that. But pre-development and post-development have to be the same.
And this is saying, yes, they meet that requirement.
They meet that requirement for everywhere around the site, but they cannot confirm without the information they ask for about what comes down to Woods Hole Road. If Woods Hole Road was a town road, and the town of Falmouth was gonna be responsible for dealing with that additional stormwater, and it may be a de minimis amount, I don't know, nor does Falmouth Engineering Division know, because the information they asked for just wasn't provided.
Nor do we need to know, because it's not our problem, it's MassDOT's problem, once we see that they do comply with the Town of Falmouth. Is that right?
That's, you could take it that way, certainly.
Is there something wrong with taking it that way?
No, but typically when you ask for information and you're reviewing a plan, you know, people give it to you because they want to make sure that everything's copacetic. But in this case, they asked for things and they said, well, that's not necessary to give you that information. So hence, Mr. McLaughlin's letter that says it complies with the 25-year stormwater. No one's going to be put out. No one's going to be inundated with water or starved with water around the property. But we just cannot confirm what's coming down into the Mass DOT right
So
away.
we may not like their attitude, but we can go back to this open engineering comment sheet and see that those things that apply to drainage, we don't have to worry about now. Is that
Correct.
true?
Correct. And we will be asking for, as we, and we've had some some discussions with council, relatively informal, that if the jitney is something that the town would like to see, although Mass DOT has said we typically wouldn't permit something like that, hopefully their design and our letter of support will win the day for that. But once again, MassDOT has to sign off on those curb cuts and the sidewalk improvements and all those sort of things, and I would assume that they would be looking at that to make sure that water leaving the site isn't inundating their system.
So it's an additional reason for MassDOT to be thinking about it, but not for us.
You could certainly say that.
Okay, so if we look where the drainage is here, what then would we be checking off?
Well, like I said, Falmouth Engineering has said the drainage complies, but just not what goes into Mass DOT. And I don't have the technical creds to give you the, what those are. So regarding the outstanding comments from the planning board, or the deferral from Falmouth Engineering, deferred comments, where they're starting, this is Falmouth Engineering's letter of 4/10/19, that you have in your packet. If not, well, let me just go, let me roll through them, just because they're basically summarized on this sheet with yellow highlights. Okay, in the decision. So, deferred comments. The following summaries are comments that fall under the jurisdiction of others from Falmouth Engineering. The revised entry drive is 25 feet wide. The adjacent parking spaces are perpendicular 17 feet long gravel spaces. We defer to the planning board if what is shown on the plan is acceptable. One of the things that, one of those conditions that's been sort of slotted out in the conditional approval is about the use of the dome. We had a 4-page letter about the dome, and at the end, they said, we really don't know what the dome is gonna be used for at this point. We just don't know. So one of those conditions is, given the unknown nature of the eventual use of the geodesic dome and the limited number of parking spaces currently shown for the structure, the applicant will need to apply for a revision to a site plan prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy for the dome. So essentially, when they figure out what the dome is gonna be, then they need to come back to the planning board and likely the ZBA to say, this is what we're gonna use the dome for. And this is what we need to comply with that, those number of parking spaces and their location. The limiting factor, as the applicants have pointed out to us, is 210 gallons per day. Their system, their septic system is designed to handle all the stormwater from all the units, and 210 gallons per day is what's reserved for the dome. So whatever goes into the dome is gonna be constrained by sewage capacity, and that's always the case. You know, what you build depends on where your stuff goes. So whether the configuration of those parking spaces and the adequacy of those, I think, is not required for the units that they're creating, but for the use of the dome. So while this first comment is, the revised Ventures Drive is 25 feet wide, there's actually 24-foot wide is the requirement for a two-way street. So there's an extra foot that you could put into the parking spaces there. So once again, it's a de minimis change, but I think because if we opt for our conditional approval, as it's noted, we're putting them on notice that says, you know, when you figure out what you're gonna do with the dome, come back and tell us, and we'll take a harder look at the dome and the parking spaces around it and things like that. But it would appear if the driveway was 24 feet wide rather than 25 feet wide, we'd have the 18 feet long that you typically have for a parking space. So the numbers are there, they're just not shown on the plan. So I don't know, and I don't wanna put words in your mouth, but I think that the board probably wouldn't have an issue with that foot, knowing that the landscape is there for it. Second deferred comment, site distances at both entrances do not meet the town standards. We defer to MassDOT if the site distance is acceptable. If any additional safety requirements for construction period should be, and if any additional safety requirements for the construction period should be provided. Once again, in our conditional approval, yeah, thank you. Corey is awesome, by the way, thank you. All right. So, one of those conditions that we proposed, given the numerous renditions of site distance triangles, the Falmouth Engineering will defer to Mass DOT. However, a stamped plan and a letter from a qualified engineer or surveyor will be required, confirming that adequate site distance is achievable. In the event such site distance is not achievable, the applicant will turn to the board to discuss the appropriate mitigation to improve safe access and egress to the site. So once again, we had a number of different site distance calculations that are done. It's important to me to know what the real one is, and if somebody stamps it and signs it and puts their stamp and says, here's what it is, then I'm comfortable with that. So once again, that's gonna go to MassDOT to look at those site distances, and in our conditional approval, it says, well, if you can't achieve those site distances, then we're gonna come back and talk about what sort of mitigation there might be, whether it's a flashing beacon or whatever that case may be. That is one of those outstanding comments. Deferred comment number 3, sidewalks at both entrances should be extended downward and terminate the area designated as the pull-off. Once again, Falmouth Engineering says, we defer to the planning board and MassDOT what should be done in this area. I think the planning board has said, we favor the jitney stop. We would like to see that incorporated into the site. But it's up to MassDOT, who does not grandfather things, and has told us, quite matter-of-factly at the meeting, we typically would not approve something like that. But put something together for us, and we'll talk about it, and we'll look at it. There's a discrepancy between the Title V and the Stormwater Handbook setbacks. We defer to the Board of Health on the separation distance. This project is not subject to Conservation Commission review.
Where do you see
So,
that?
so the differences between Title V and the stormwater setback, which are in conflict, they say it's not the board's call, it's the Board of Health's call to get to that. Same thing with leaching fields. Leaching field overflows stormwater through Woods Hole. We defer to the planning board if the proposed project meets the regulation. And once again, this gets back to some of the HydroCAD calculations. Our engineering department has said they meet the 25-year storm, and our requirement is the 25-year storm. So I think we're fine with that. Corey, do you want to pick up on any of your,
I'm not sure if you want to mention in terms of septic anything.
yeah, why don't you go ahead and,
So within the decision, when we touch on the Board of Health review and approval, engineering highlighted potential grading implications that could impact stormwater management, and that was in reference to what Tom was talking about with the septic. Engineering had outlined potential cover issues over some of the septic system components, and CMR requires a maximum cover of 36 for all system components, and requires a minimum of 9-inch backfill over leaching areas. Engineering recommend that grading that does not impact stormwater be revised, and that if any revisions are required by the Board of Health, impacts to stormwater management should be kept in mind. So, there's just some issues with the grading over the septic area with stormwater.
and like I said, some of these things are very widgety, but that's what their job is, to look at those widgets and see they comply. In some cases, it's another board making that creation. But as we've talked about before, and one of the things we've talked about, one of the early conditions in the decision is we realize that this still has to be reviewed by Falmouth Historic Commission. Let me just take it from the top if I can. I know I'm all over the place. I've had way too much coffee today, so forgive me. So conditions 1 in your draft decision. If I can get you to that page. Condition 1, the plan shall be constructed as approved. Any changes to be reviewed by the planning board to determine if a modification of the decision is necessary, and this is our standard language. Pursuant to 24183 of the zoning bylaw, no permit for occupancy of new construction shall be issued until the planning board is satisfied the conditions have been met. Condition number 2, the project will require the applicant to file a new application for certificate of appropriateness by the Historical Commission to review 4 of the 7 proposed buildings, as well as the rehabilitation of the dome, all found within the Woods Hole Historic District. The design review function of the planning board's site plan decision shall not supersede the Historical Commission's issuance of certificate of appropriateness. With the condition 3, with the understanding that portions of the site lie within the Woods Hole Historic District and the jurisdiction of the Falmouth Historical Commission, the board anticipates that the site plan may need additional review in the event that the footprints of any building are shifted. Now, I think we've talked about this in-house a couple times in reorienting some of the buildings in their relationship to the dome. So chances are, they don't need to move buildings around, and Falmouth Historic Commission, which Corey's much more familiar with, may want to see some distance changes in the design and facades. And I'll have to fully defer to Corey on that. But we anticipate if for some reason someone said, yeah, you moved it, but the Historic Commission would like to see it moved a little more. Well, if they move that building, then that has potential for stormwater implications. So some of these things we will likely, we could be seeing again. If things are fine from the Historic Commission as far as the orientation of the buildings, and it's just a matter of design, of the features of the buildings, of those design features, that doesn't really impact the site plan. That impacts their view and their jurisdiction. And we need to defer to them because they're the Historic Commission. They get to do that. So that was number 3. Number 4, I had talked about a little earlier. Given the unknown nature of the eventual use of the geodesic dome and the limited number of parking spaces currently shown for the structures, the applicant will need to apply for a revision to the site plan prior to the issue of a certificate of occupancy for the dome. On to page 4. The design of an ADA compliant sidewalk along the frontage of the dome, and this is simply along the frontage of the dome. We dismissed the idea of carrying sidewalk improvements down the street. So a design of the ADA compliant sidewalk along the frontage of the dome will be provided to the town of Falmouth for comment by the engineering division and the planning office prior to submitting plans to Mass DOT. Their current set of plans shows the sidewalk in the road right-of-way in front of the property, but it sort of stops when it gets to that potential jitney stop. So what we would be asking them to do is design that they're going to submit to Mass DOT, and just have our engineering department take a look at it, just to give them sort of a leg up. Because our engineering department is very gracious, and they're very diligent in working things, and they're very, they learn a lot of rattle stuff, and they spend a lot of time on these plans. They are the bomb. So we just want to make sure that what they put together, what they design, sort of gets a couple engineers to look at, and it's essentially a free consulting service to the project, because it's a public benefit, in my opinion. So that sidewalk, let's make sure we see it before we submit those plans to Mass DOT. Similarly, a design for the requested jitney stop at the western driveway will be provided to the town of Falmouth for comment by the engineering and planning office prior to submitting plans to Mass DOT. The planning board has written a letter of support of the requested stop. Item number 7, and this is what I talked about before, considering the revisions to the site plan. Given the numerous renditions of the site plan, site distance triangles, Falmouth Engineering defer to Mass DOT. However, stamp plan and a letter from a qualified professional engineer survey will be required confirming that adequate site distance is achievable. In the event such required site distance is not achievable, the applicant will return to the board to discuss appropriate mitigation to improve safe ingress and egress to the site. Condition number 8, the landscaping should be installed in accordance with the above reference plan. Condition number 9, the Cape Cod Commission minor modification type number 2 decision dated August 9, 2018 is hereby incorporated by reference to the extent applicable and not inconsistent. That sounds like something we pulled from somebody else's document. It it's essentially imports the Cape Cod Commission's review into our decision. And the applicant will provide bike racks in at least one location. Nice to have one simple condition on the plan.
And isn't it true, since the last town meeting passed our recommendation, that before they can get any certificate of occupancy, it has to be certified that they followed all these conditions and their own plans?
That's correct. So those are the conditions that we put together. I kind of hopped over the front part of the decision. But because those conditions are sort of related to the engineering review, I wanted to kind of have that discussion with the board prior to.
Okay, now, what I wanted to do is, instead of having this read as a motion initially, because there's so much here that I think should be discussed preliminarily to making the motion. A motion, once it's made and seconded, is either voted up, voted down, or withdrawn. And I don't think we should be personally, I don't think we should be, as a board, in that position until we get a little bit more discussion on this. If you disagree with me, I'd be happy to entertain a motion.
No, I agree.
Okay. So, I don't know whether you want to read the rest of it. Tom read the conditions. What gives me pause is all the open engineering items, and then the final statement, the board finds engineering's open comments and new comments have been appropriately addressed to issue the site plan decision. And yet we have engineering saying, So I don't know how you want to handle that.
I don't think I've ever voted in favor of a motion on a project where there have been open items. There have been times when the engineers have made suggestions and that we have complied with other things to mitigate that concern. But there's just too many open things. It's an argument between an engineering firm and the town engineering, and I want that straightened out before I can vote in favor of this. And also, too, it hasn't gone before the Historic Commission yet, and if they can change the location of buildings, then that kind of undoes a lot of things, too. I want to have everything set in concrete so that we can have a positive motion, read it, vote on it, and be done with it. I can't go along with all the openness on this.
John, you expressed dismay how long this has been taking. What are your comments from what you're seeing?
Well, it's a little disappointing to see that it's gone on this long between their engineer and the town's engineer. But they're obviously gonna have to meet the town of Falmouth engineer's recommendations. So I don't know if we can structure it, if we could vote to approve this and add that as part of the conditions, that they meet the town of Falmouth engineer's criteria. I think they're going to anyway.
But do you ever recall approving something with so much open and unresolved?
No, but seems to be a complicated site plan.
It is.
And I would be comfortable knowing that they had to meet, they have to come in here with an approved plan afterward to get an occupancy. And I don't know if you guys are comfortable with putting in the condition that they meet the town of Falmouth engineering's requirements.
What I'm not comfortable with, and I know I'm over-speaking probably, I am not comfortable with the statement that the board finds engineering's open comments and new comments have been appropriately addressed to issue the site plan decision. I think I'd much rather have a statement to say that before any occupancy would be allowed, we need to have a condition, I'm not stating it right, but we need to have a condition added to the conditions that all of these will be satisfactorily answered to Falmouth Engineering's specifications.
Town of Falmouth engineering
Yeah,
department.
what did I say?
Falmouth engineering.
Oops.
Town of.
Sorry, Town of Falmouth.
If we can do that, I'm very comfortable with they're gonna have to meet the guidelines anyway.
So, Mr. Dooley, would you just repeat that?
I would be comfortable with putting as part of the motion that the applicant satisfy the town of Falmouth engineering department's requirements for this site before they get an occupancy permit.
Pat,
Yes.
I'm confused. As I read these things that the engineering division is saying remain open, they appear to apply to the 25-year storm design, which they say, that same town engineer concurs that it complies with the town of Falmouth's requirement. So why doesn't that address that?
All of these issues?
Well, if you look at them, just look at them and see what it is they're talking about. I know it's an awful lot to look at all of a sudden, but they're all drainage this and drainage that.
And some are 25-year, but a lot aren't. Well,
But we have here that it's meeting the requirement.
except he says that all others do not. That's that last statement in the town engineer's letter.
Yes, but then it turns out that all the others, there aren't all the others. Tom has just gone through them. He went through each week, he could do it again. Unless I heard him incorrectly. Anything that's here that isn't addressed by the town drainage requirement is something over which we don't have authority. It's going to go to MassDOT, or it's going to go to the Historic Commission. Bob's concern is that we want Mass Historic, but not Mass Historic, the Town Historic Commission to have already done their work before we approve it, but that's not the order of the process. We
No,
will be holding them up, so we can't do that. We're going to have to take an action before it can go forward to the historic review. Right?
I think so, but I'm one
So
vote.
it would
Yeah, no,
appear
I agree with
that,
that. I agree with that.
Okay,
yeah, so it would appear that the drainage issue, much as he may not like it entirely, does conform with the town's storm design.
So,
It-
since we've been reading this from backward to forward, this decision.
Right.
My bad. If you don't mind, I'm gonna take it from the top, and we'll get down those particular
Thank you.
decisions as well. So draft April 23rd, 2019 motion, the planning board vote to approve the application of Woods Hole Partners LLC under Article 39 Site Plan Review of the zoning bylaws entitled Proposed Site Development Plans at 533, 539 Woods Hole Road, Falmouth, Massachusetts, prepared by Cape and Island Engineering, dated October 5, 2018, revised January 31, 2019, and March 29, 2019, scale 1 to 30, 21 sheets, along with floor plans and architectural elevations entitled 533 Woods Hole Road, prepared by Longfellow Design, 23 sheets, scale as noted, with the latest revisions of February 14, 2017, with the following findings and conditions. Findings. The applicant, Woods Hole Partner LLC, is seeking to redevelop a 5.4-acre parcel located at 533 Woods Hole Road, map number 51-050000002B, and partially located in the Woods Hole Historic District. The parcel is zoned business redevelopment, BR, and the applicant is proposing to construct 43-unit residential complex consisting of 39 market rate dwelling units in 5 buildings, 3 duplex buildings, 1 20-unit building, and 1 13-unit building, along with 2 detached duplex buildings containing 4 affordable rental units, along with associated services, parking, drainage, and landscaping. The geodesic dome, quote, the dome, designed by Buckminster Fuller, is currently situated on the site, along with the Nautilus Hotel. The applicant is proposing to rehabilitate the dome and demolish the Nautilus Hotel. The Engineering Division's referral dated April 10th, 2019, outlines open comments and new comments from the past 3 referrals reviewing the applicant's site plan. Following comments remain open. This is the minutia. The applicant's engineer included an image for a typical catch basin grate. The usual catch basin grates around Falmouth have 6 rows of 6 columns, 36 openings, that are 2.5 inches square. See referral for image. Since the drainage model relies on outflows for these gates, engineering recommends that the drawings include the Foundry catalog number and the Pacific catch basin grate or equal, or the calculations be revised to model the catch basin grates typical to this area. Second bullet point. In revised calculations, there is outflow from the system in the 25-year storm and 100-year storms. As mentioned above, the catch basin grate model should be called out with the plans to match the calculations, or the calculations be revised for the catch basin grates typical to the area. The following comments are new in Falmouth Engineering's and for engineering based on the above referenced plans. Bullet point, engineering recommends the applicant's engineer provide a revised summary table and the 2 pre-development calculation summaries, 25 and 100-year storms from HydroCAD. Next bullet point, the delineation for catch basin A5 does not appear to be correct based on the grading near building D. The majority of A5 would discharge to B15, that by the way is catch basin 15, I know that much about engineering, would discharge to catch basin 15 based on the grading, while the model routes it all to Woods Hole Road. The calculations should be adjusted to reflect the grading, or the grading in this area should be revised in order to reflect the stormwater model. Next bullet point, where does the 10-minute direct entry time of concentration for A5, B3A, and B3B come from? If it isn't the minimum 5-minute time of concentration, it should be calculated by HydroCAD, or backup calculations should be provided. Provide backup information where 10 minutes comes from, or use HydroCAD to calculate likely done for C2. Next bullet point. The time of concentration calculations for C2 for 100 feet of sheet flow. In New England, without backup information, 50 is the maximum sheet flow length utilized, and without backup, typically only 50 foot of sheet flow is used. This time of concentration should be revised using the 50-foot feet of sheet flow. Next bullet point. The time of concentration calculations for C2 uses woodland surfaces for shallow concentrated flow portions. The T55 shallow concentrated flow procedure only uses paved and unpaved surfaces. The other choices in HydroCAD are for the upland method. This time of concentration should be revised using paved or unpaved surfaces. Next bullet point. The time of concentration calculations for C2 uses a 2-year storm depth of 3.4 inches. The 2-year storm depth for Barnstable County is 3.6 inches. The time of concentration should be revised using 3.6 inches for a 2-year storm. Next bullet point. A stone splash is proposed near CB14. There doesn't appear to be a detail for this. Engineering recommends that a detail for this area be added to the drawings. Next bullet point. Some of the town standard calculations use 50-minute leaching times, some use 60 minutes. Using 50 minutes would result in a comparative sizing of the systems. Engineering recommends future calculation, pardon?
Conservative.
Thank you. Result in conservative sizing of the systems. Period. Engineering recommends future calculations be consistent. Next bullet point. The 2 drainage pipes behind Building A add up to 330 linear feet based on the labels. A stormwater model uses 350 linear feet of pipe in the model. Engineering recommends that when new calculations are produced, this should be consistent between the calculations and the plans, since these pipes have flow in the 100-year storm. Next bullet point. The sewer line is going through the stone bed of DW1A. The sewer line should be rerouted or the drywall removed. Next bullet point. The HydroCAD models were run at a time span of 0 to 24 hours. Typically, models are run for a time span of 0 to 72 hours. The 100-year storm at minimum should be run for this time span to evaluate if the stormwater holdings facilities drain in 72 hours. Engineering recommend that the applicant's engineer produce a summary of all holding facilities showing that they drain in 72 hours. That is the bold statements. Next line, the one that is the board finds engineering's open comments and new comments have appropriately addressed to issue the site plan decision. This property is not located in a coastal pond overlay or water resource protection district. The applicant is proposing a fast treatment system designed for nitrogen-sensitive areas. In the Board of Health referral dated January 17, 2009, the proposed system is designed for under 10,000 gallons per day and will only require the Board of Health's approval, while the Title V system is subject to the Board of Health's review and approval. Engineering has highlighted potential grading implications that could impact stormwater management. Engineering has outlined potential cover issues over some of the septic system components. 310 CMR 15-221-7 requires a maximum cover of 36 inches for all system components, and 310 CMR 15.249 requires a minimum of 9 inches of backfill over leaching areas. Engineering is recommending that the grading does not impact engineering recommend that the grading does not impact stormwater be revised, and that if any revisions are required by the Board of Health, impacts to stormwater management should be kept in mind. The Water Department referral dated December 28, 2018 states that the applicant will need to submit plans for the water main extension for full review. A private main servicing the duplex unit will need to be replaced by an 8-inch main with a hydrant. A utility easement will be required to do so so the Water Department can access all curb stops, and the applicant's engineer should, as necessary, have their fire suppression designer coordinate with the Water Department for fire flow testing. The Fire Department provided no comments to the above referenced plan. The board finds that the applicant has met the requirements of filing with the Cape Cod Commission as a development of regional impact, evidenced by its minor modification, type number 2, approval dated August 9th, 2018. The board finds the proposed landscaping plan is compliant with Article 24 and shall require that the applicants maintain the plantings as conditioned below. The planning board does not include building code review, and the board defers to the building commissioner as to whether issues are related to building code. Planning board would like to thank the applicant for the revised plans and elevations based upon the board's review and comments, and then those conditions that no modification, no certificate of occupancy. Required review by the Historic Commission, understanding that portions of that are in there, and they may have to come back to us if any of those buildings are shifted. Given the unknown future, you have to come back to us to tell us what you're doing with the dome before you get a certificate of occupancy for that. ADA compliant sidewalk in front of the dome be provided to engineering for comments prior to submitting to MassDOT. The design for the jitney, once again, submitted to engineering and prior to submitting to MassDOT. And numerous site distance calculations that we've had, that we have certification from a professional engineer survey that notes that they are adequate site distance is achievable. In such event that site distance is not achievable, the applicant will return to the board to discuss the appropriate mitigation and provide to improve safe ingress and egress to the site. Landscaping shall be installed in accordance with the above referenced plan, maintained in a healthy state, and the Cape Cod Commission decision will be incorporated by reference into this plan, and the applicant will provide bike racks.
So Charlotte, in regard to your comment that this is all 25 years, no, it's not. It's
No, it's
listed in
not.
here.
Right, whereas the standard is 25 years, many of these seem to require a 100-year storm. And I wonder that if our rule is 25, why are they being held to this standard?
I believe we require that of everybody, because there are 100-year storms.
We apparently don't. It would appear that the rule is 25.
Yes, as I understand it from our engineering department, the proposed drainage system complies with the town of Falmouth's 25-year storm design. So these are, like I said, these are a bit of minutia,
Okay.
but in one of these cases, this says, well, if you're not using the grade we usually use, tell us what grade it is or redesign the calculations. So we have a letter from engineering that says, it's gonna comport with this, but, essentially, they've said, water's gonna stay on the site where it's supposed to, but the water comes down the hill into MassDOT's is something we can't give you a confirmation on, because the information we requested, we don't have it, so, and it's not their jurisdiction.
Paul, you have a comment.
Well, this is a very important project. It's been going on for a long time. The applicant has made a lot of adjustments that we requested. And a lot of the things I see in the comments from the engineering department are not very critical, but they need to be addressed. And I propose to have a meeting between the engineer and Cape and Islands engineer with the engineering department and try to work these things out. Because the calculations so forth should be provided. To say they're not gonna, we'll give them to you, doesn't make any sense. But having a meeting might resolve most of those outstanding issues. My concern is the deadline for this project is April 30th, which is next Tuesday. And I don't know if they can meet this week and do something by the end of the week or not, or you have to get an extension. But this has been going on a long time. We have to come to closure fairly soon on this project.
Is it possible that these, you call them minutia, and the engineer on the board seems to think they're relatively trivial, which should be addressed? Is it possible that they could be addressed administratively within the time frame?
And that is to Mr. Drewley's point, that the applicant satisfied the town of Falmouth's engineering division's requirements.
Before you get an occupancy permit.
Right.
I mean, they're gonna have to meet these standards. Whether they meet, don't meet, or they're gonna have to meet these standards. If we make it part of the conditions, they have to meet the standards.
So we want to rewrite
Exactly what,
and put a condition here.
and a lot of, to be arguing about the size of the opening for the grates, it's ridiculous. If the town has a standard, meet the standard. Everybody else has to meet it. I'm really upset with their engineer that they haven't,
yeah.
they haven't fixed this.
We've got a lot of time to do it.
So we'll fix it for them.
But what troubles me on the decision here is the statement, the board finds that engineering's open comments and new comments have been appropriately addressed to issue this site plan decision. They haven't been appropriately addressed.
If these are addressed, then they will have met it. I think that's a better way of saying it. When, not if. When these are addressed, they will have met the standard.
Yes.
Or could these concerns be individual conditions of the decision?
They could be. Just flip them into the conditions and say,
Right.
okay? So instead of listing them in the body here, flip them
As conditions.
as conditions
Absolutely.
and say before occupancy.
Yeah, I'd be happy with that.
Yeah, but the point, most of these issues can be resolved in a meeting. I don't think to put condition on the size of the grate or something, just use the grates that have been the standard. I mean, those things can be resolved very quickly
Exactly.
without having to
Right.
put conditions in the agreement like that.
But it doesn't
The
hurt to
problem
do it.
is also is that the zoning board of appeals is waiting for the planning board concurrence before they approve this project. So this thing just tumbles down further and further.
That's why if we make these part of the conditions, we can vote.
We can vote on next Tuesday on the 30th.
Because I know myself, I'm not gonna bend on this. I mean, I'm not an engineer. This is what the town of Falmouth says is required. And they're building these in the town of Falmouth.
And I don't ever remember having this kind of
No, I know, it's like,
obstinacy.
there's something a little off here, but if the fire department said you had to put a fire hydrant here, or the water department, you'd have to put a hydrant there. If the town of Falmouth, if they said, we want hydrant number 304, it would have to be hydrant 304. There'd be no argument about it. There shouldn't be any argument about this either.
If I may,
And I, for one, like Bob said, make it part of the conditions, and let's vote this thing.
and I've sat in on 2 meetings with Falmouth Engineering Division and their engineers as we've gone through this project to make sure they understood what we're looking at. So there hasn't been a 3rd meeting, but we have had 2 previous meetings at the DPW barn with the chief engineer and the town engineer to make sure that everybody was on the same page. And if we can put one of those together, and it could be possible that they just give the information that engineering's looking for, and the necessity for a 3rd meeting isn't required. But I'll report back to to our engineering division as to where we're at. The applicant and their counsel is here, so they can certainly chat with their engineering firm about proceeding with that.
So where we are right now tonight is, that's why I wanted to do this discussion and not have a motion, as you can see. Where we are right now, from what I'm seeing with the board, is you leave that under findings, engineering division's referral has not been met. And so flip all of these into conditions.
Yeah.
With the condition being that before any occupancy can be allowed, these will all be satisfactorily met.
To the town of
To
Falmouth
town of Falmouth.
Engineering
But
Department.
that
Right.
applies to all things now, since we voted it.
Yeah, well, we haven't voted anything.
We haven't
I
voted
read-
anything.
Since town meeting voted that
correct.
you needed to do that.
So, and I think some of those bold points hopefully will go away before we have a vote
Yeah.
next week. I would
Having a
like-
meeting.
In that case, they would have met the condition and can take it off the table.
Yeah, but if they're not met,
And we'll add them in as conditions if
Yeah.
that's the board's
Yeah.
pleasure.
I mean,
Okay.
I was really hoping for a positive motion tonight, so we can vote on this, but I think we do need to go this next step and draft something for next week.
I'm just curious, was there a reason for Falmouth Engineering to withhold information and not share that?
Point of order. Are you talking about the Falmouth Division? Falmouth Engineering is a company here.
That's
Yeah.
exactly
we're
what
talking
I
about
thought.
the Falmouth Division.
Cape and Islands
And
Engineering.
they did not, they weren't
The
forthcoming.
Engineering Division.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm unclear why that should have transpired anyway, why do you not give the town everything they want and need, and you've got the requirements of the town, which you're gonna have to meet, so why, this is, to me, it's really foolish.
Well, I can't tell you why, but it just says, like I said, at the bottom of page 1, this is the things in bold on Falmouth Engineer, or Cape and Islands Engineering, April 16th letter, says, the bottom of page 1, the drainage system as designed contains the town of Falmouth stormwater drainage volume. There is no need to revise the pre-developed calculations. Overall stormwater runoff impacts are greatly reduced with the project as proposed, compared to the lack of drainage currently on the site. I don't know why they said that, but that's what they said.
it's like in your face.
So what we're
We
saying
don't need to
is-
do it.
I cannot read into people's intent, nor would I ever try.
But you said that that was the standard, that it has to be the same or less, and they're saying, yes, that's true. So there's a reason for that statement.
So I think if I'm hearing the board, what you would like to do is incorporate those bold outstanding points as conditions. And in the event that those conditions are met prior to our meeting next week, then we're good to go.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, John.
If we make them part of the conditions, why can't we vote tonight? What's the reason not to vote?
We don't
Just gotta
have the
rewrite it.
exact wording of how it will be done, and hopefully this will be resolved by next Tuesday, and we can just flash. That's it.
It's, as I understand, it's been the board's policy to review the decision and then vote it after the board has had a chance to look at it. So essentially, you're seeing the decision. Not much is gonna change other than those bullet points that drop off because they've been addressed, or they'll be listed as conditions in the development. So in this next week, that we'll move forward with whatever we move forward with, and you'll have a decision remarkably like this, with those outstanding issues as conditions, or they will have met them and they'll be gone.
Outstanding engineering conditions.
Yes.
Okay.
Pat, question.
Yes.
It sounds like we would be in good order and we will vote for this next
As far as I
Tuesday.
know.
But supposing something goes wrong,
That's why my next comment was going to be, I want them to be prepared to come in with a request for an extension.
right.
You mentioned that last time
Mhm.
anyway.
And Bob Ament didn't want to do that.
I
But
know, but
if we are not fully resolved on Tuesday, we would be forced to put a negative vote out, unless we have a request for an extension that allows some more revision. So we would absolutely need a request for at least one more week's extension at that point.
So I have another question. Is there anything that the Historical Commission could pose that would change the decision? That would impact the decision?
Yeah, placement of buildings. They could shift a building or move a building. They could
And
say
then
they
they would
don't
have to
like
come
the
back.
project. They can essentially provide a negative approval, and the project can't move forward.
So they would have to then come back to comply with the Historical Commission's decision?
Correct.
Yeah, so let's just say, just for example, they say, well, this building is 2 feet too close to the dome. Move it. We move that building, that changes where the pavement goes at, that changes the drainage thing, so that starts a technical review. But if Falmouth Historic is about, the elements of the architecture and design and things like that, those aren't things, in my opinion, that rise to the level of, you've got to change those plans, because our site plans are about the buildings, there are separate elevations for the architecture and things like that.
Paul, you had a question? or
I realize this is a board discussion, but it would be appropriate to ask the applicant to make some comments on this discussion at this time?
We don't usually when
We
we're
don't
having a
usually.
discussion.
Okay.
No, but if we have a question of the applicant, we've been known to ask those questions to have.
I think we're all
Within our
concerned about
discussion.
getting this stuff wrapped up, and there hasn't been much movement on some of the technical issues. So is there gonna be movement in the next week to be able to?
Paul, I would have to suggest that the applicant and his attorney are sitting right there, and they're hearing everything we have to say, and it would be
Okay.
rather foolish if
Okay.
something didn't happen between now and then, to wrap it up.
Okay.
John?
I would also like to add that our next scheduled meeting was, what, 3 weeks from now?
We're
2
holding,
weeks from now? I
we're
know
holding one on the-
I know we're gonna meet next week, but
Mhm.
I think this board is going, doing as much as it can do to get this voted
Yes.
in the time frame that we're allowed.
Again, I have not ever seen this kind of thing since I've
Crazy.
been on the board for 18 years, that we have bent over like this for an applicant.
To meet the time frame.
And it's a courtesy to the zoning board of appeals, who's continued this a couple times.
Absolutely it is.
Okay.
So we will continue this until Next Tuesday,
Tuesday.
April 30th, and have you decided on a time yet, Tom?
Well, as you may know, and we missed this in the announcement section, next week is the Heritage Dinner. And the Heritage Dinner is honoring 3 prominent Falmouth women. I'm gonna get 2 of them right, so I'm not gonna say any of them. And it's 5 to 8, so next Tuesday. So if the board was able to meet earlier at 4, it would allow some of those people who believe these women should be celebrated and would like to be there to celebrate them. So if we're able to meet at 4 or 4:30, I don't believe we're going to have a long discussion about this. If the board is able to meet earlier than that, we'll post the meeting earlier, and we'll be in and out on a one-item
Okay.
agenda.
Is there anyone who cannot meet at 4?
I have a coastal resiliency committee meeting at 4.
Blow it off.
This is gonna be a quick meeting.
You can go after
Finish
Paul.
with the discussion, right?
Yeah, we're just
Suppose we
deciding
met
on,
at
That's a new issue.
well,
meet?
we're deciding on when we can meet next
Suppose we
Tuesday.
met at 3:30, so that
Yeah.
Paul could,
Would that be okay, Paul? We met at 3:30?
3.
Oh, there's a couple people who are usually very busy during the
I know,
daytime.
and that's why,
I'll be there.
you'll be
Whatever,
there.
just pick a time.
How about you, John?
Do we get overtime for it?
yes.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
get double
right.
time.
You're-
Absolutely.
you're triples,
3 o'clock.
And
actually.
I'll be here, whatever time
Okay,
you.
so why don't we say 3?
3, okay,
All right?
3 o'clock.
And the only thing that would change if this room was booked for some reason, but typically it's not booked at 3 o'clock. So, April 30th.
But since it's so unusual, please send out in big flashing letters a reminder of this.
We will, I think the town crier typically is not working between town meetings. I can ask him if he could personally come to your streets and give
Okay.
you a oye, oye. April 30th, 3 PM.
In this room?
Yes, ma'am.
Presumably, if we have to change rooms, that will be announced as well.
Ready to move on?
Oh, yeah, I
Okay.
already announced that, except we had to decide
Okay.
on the meeting time.
Next item on the agenda, public discussion, applicant 797 Main Street LLC site plan review application to construct a mixed-use structure of 2,700 square feet, restaurant on the first floor, and 3 residential units above located at 797 Main Street. For the applicant,
For the applicant, my name is Hal Chuber. I'm a consulting engineer with offices at 112 State Road in Dartmouth, Massachusetts. Mr. Chairman, member of the board, if you remember, recall, we came here before you about a couple of months ago for a proposal to redevelop this site at 797 Main Street, what used to be the Cumberland Farms gas station. The proposal was to demolish the existing building and leave the foundation, and then square the existing foundation and construct a 2.5-story building on the property. The first floor was to be used for a restaurant and 3 residential units on top. We did present the project, we get some feedback, and at that time, it's safe to say that most of the concerns at that time were to do with traffic, not traffic, the parking, and also the design of the building, the mass of the building. I believe we had some comments here that to redesign the building and to try to accommodate some more parking. You felt that the site was too small to support such a size building, and also you did suggest that we reach out to the neighbors, the abutters, and work with them. So we did exactly what you told us to do. We did go back to the drawing board. We did contact the abutter to the south, east, and west, and we worked out a parking plan that would maximize the use of both properties. By doing that, we were able to secure another 16 parking spaces to the south, south of the building on Cycle Ave, and another 5 parking spaces to the east of the building on Cycle. By doing that, I have the breakdown of the parking data on the plans. We are required to have 28 parking spaces according to your zoning bylaws, and we do have 31 parking spaces available before 4:30 or during bank business hours, and we do have another additional 4 and 5 9 parking spaces after the bank business hours, a total of 40 spaces. We did resubmit to engineering. I believe you have the review from the town engineer. I can tell you that for sure the town engineer agrees that the system is designed to accommodate the 25-year storm, as I heard discussions before. Also, what we did, we revised the design of the building. The proposed addition to the building is only for the first floor, and we reduced the second floor footprint. I believe previously the plans we submitted to you showed a 2,700 square foot second floor. The new floor now, the square footage of the second floor of the apartment is 1,975. I'll go back to that. And also, we did reduce the third floor footprint from 1,800 square feet to 980 square feet. It's in compliance. The third floor is less than 50% of the second floor, as you required and indicated in the last meeting. We did add some landscape to the front. We added some trees, and I want to take you to the, as I indicated too, we're picking up all the runoff on site and collecting it by a closed drainage system to an on-site infiltration system. Currently, the whole site is covered with impervious surfaces. There are no stormwater collection system on site. That was reviewed by the town engineer. I know there's some open comments. Most of it, I believe he deferred it to the planning board, but the technical issues, most of the technical concerns and issues were addressed. This is the floor layout for the first floor. I believe the dining, we show you the seating. There's total of 44 seats, including 6 seats at the bar area. The dining room area is about 1,200 square feet. This is the second floor layout, and as I indicated, this is a reduction from 2,700 to 1,975, and this is the third floor layout, also was reduced drastically, and also would be in compliance and with the 50% requirement of the second floor. We did change the elevation dramatically. You can see there's a huge improvement. It's not a square mass building that we had previously. We do agree with your recommendations, and if you look at the elevations, each elevation is practically different than the other elevations. It looks like almost 4 different buildings. As I indicated also, we added more landscape, and Mr. Bott is here too. He had a concern about the layout. We just met about maybe half an hour before this meeting, and he can probably fill you in on the rest of the stuff. But if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have. I'm going back to the site, just,
Charlotte, do you have?
It's a big improvement. Much, much better looking building overall. Had an opportunity to be looking at it this afternoon and really studying it, and it took a while to realize that the second floor is not immediately above the first floor. It juts out a little bit. It's a little bit bigger, and then in addition, it has balconies. How deep are those balconies? About 4
in the
feet?
front,
Front and around the side?
about 4 feet.
About 4 feet?
Yeah, well, we're using them for fire escape too, because you have to have 2 means of egress in the building, so.
So it will create a mass that, at street level, will look as if you're looking at sort of a stockade fortress. because of the balconies, is that right?
I don't think so. I think if you look at it, it makes it more attractive with the building. It's not on the same line as the first floor. It makes it, you have the jogs in and out, you know, that makes the building
Yeah, it breaks
more
it up.
interesting.
And you do get an arcade effect underneath.
You do, yes. So you have a covered, basically covered sidewalk. And we're in compliance with, we're in compliance with the zoning, with the setbacks too, because the building is about 42 feet from the street line.
Well, I agree that it's a much better looking building, and it is going to look much better across the street from the Marks Building than the first one that was brought in.
John, you have anything?
Not right now, thank you.
Paul?
Just like to say, I appreciate your efforts to accommodate the questions of the planning board. I think it's a much better building, and I appreciate your efforts.
Thank you.
Pat, you got anything?
I love the changes. So I want to say a heartfelt thank you for all of your work, and you're listening to the planning board and our suggestions too. I have one comment that where you have an agreement for the shared parking there, I would like to say that I think before we should issue a decision, we should see a signed agreement with the owner of that property.
PM?
No, that was exactly what I was
Okay.
gonna, that took it.
Yeah, I think it's a vast improvement over the first iteration that we saw. And now that you have some roof on the south side, I'm wondering if you might be able to throw a few solar panels on there.
The roof will be designed to accommodate the weight of a solar panels. I think the owner's exploring the options and the opportunity for that, yeah.
I've had a lot of time to review this, because I went up and spoke with Tom. Actually, it's amazing. I didn't think it could be done, but basically what they've done is through cross easements have taken Cycle Way and moved the rights to travel onto your site, so you now have to have cross easements with both parties coming and going. So it's almost like you've incorporated all the land into your site, and you've done so not with changing the fee, but with putting easements, and I thought that was very creative. I also thought that there's gonna be a buffer, we haven't discussed it, but there's gonna be, is that 5-foot buffer still there, Tom?
Correct, that is the nature of a meeting with Hal this afternoon, to kind of walk through some of the things we had talked about earlier in the day. So, our parking requirements require that parking not be within 5 feet of the property line. And in this case, because we have a shared parking provision, if you try to put that 5-foot buffer on the property line, it
Get 10 foot of
it
buffer.
takes, it doesn't allow people to travel past the site. So if we take that 5-foot buffer and move it back into the easement area, into those shared spaces in the back, we get that 5 foot. That is something that obviously would have to be incorporated into that agreement, because it's one thing to use somebody's stuff, but if you use somebody's stuff and cut holes in it and put plants in it, you should ask before you do so. That's my
It's
own
usually a
opinion.
good idea.
So there's a couple of things that pointed out. If we get that 5-foot strip at the back and permission to park the dumpster for the site in that easement area, then we're in pretty good shape. Regarding access to the site, as Mr. Fox pointed out, it would probably require to have an easement for that two-way driveway through the back of the site. That driveway width right now is 36 feet wide, so there's plenty of room for traffic to get through there and for delivery vehicles to get in there. Even when we put that 5-foot buffer, and that's essentially gonna pull those parking spaces on Cycle Ave 5 feet further onto the property, but we've got a 36-foot wide driveway, and you need 24 feet. So there's room to deal with that.
So they solved everything with easements, basically. Yeah, I thought it was pretty creative. I looked at the site a lot, I'm very familiar with it, and I wasn't sure how you're gonna do it. After the plans we saw the last time, I went out of here thinking, hey, they're not gonna be able to do this. So I'm really impressed that you came up
I think
with
it works for all.
I think everybody tried to get together. I think a butter is very generous with you in trying to make this work. Everyone wants it to work. It's for the good for the
Right,
town.
for all.
And what Charlotte pointed out today, she didn't mention it tonight, but it was a very good point. this is really in line with the redevelopment district, and it's putting housing on top of retail, which is our main goal. So this fits with the local comprehensive plan. It hits on everything we're trying to do in so many ways. It just is a vast improvement to what we saw, so congratulations. That was a big.
Great job.
Big job. I think Tom had something to do with it too. I think there was a lot of work involved with our staff.
Yeah.
And, because I wasn't sure how you're gonna do it, but whoever suggested turning the building, that changes the whole look. Is it you,
Bob?
Bob? Well, that was a good one too. Those two things, that and the creative easements made the site work. I wasn't sure how you're gonna do. Without that, it wasn't gonna work. It just wasn't gonna work. The site didn't work, and we weren't gonna, the big giant box you were putting on there
traffic,
didn't look
yeah.
right. But I think you've done it. I was really pleased too.
Could I,
You can go back again, sure.
it's actually not, it's going back further than you think. It's going back to what we were just talking about, and sort of argumentative. This is saying a drainage map was provided, calculations showing the proposed system can mitigate for the town's 25-year, 1-hour design storm. That apparently is the standard, I would gather, for all projects, whether they're built on a hill or not.
Sounds like it.
It does.
Well, that's really
Not, I
This-
know,
It's not this project.
yeah, that's,
don't need to respond to that, just saying.
but that's something we should keep in mind.
Mhm.
But anyways,
So we're gonna draft a motion?
I think so, yeah, we'd like to
Is that what the
instruct
intent is?
a positive, instruct staff to draft a positive motion. That's what I'm hearing, everybody?
Could we add that to the agenda for the 30th?
No.
No?
No way.
Thank you for asking, though.
Why not?
So May 14th is our next regularly scheduled meeting. And I think in that time, it'll give Hal a chance to make some revisions to the plan, nail down this agreement with the landscaping in the Cycle Ave, the dumpster location, and to address a couple things that are really sort of those things regarding the stormwater compliance and things like that. So I think, to everyone's point, they did a nice job, they listened, and when people do a nice job and they listen, it's nice to approve your project. But that's, I don't vote.
I think I'm really familiar with the site. I've spent a lot of time working around it, and I think it's a huge, well, just remember what's there. I mean, it really,
It's gonna be a vast improvement over what's there.
a vast improvement.
Disgusting.
Yeah.
And they'll have great, the real vision I like is the no parking in front and incorporating pedestrian uses and walkways to invite people into the site and have the street connect. Our long-range vision is to have this pedestrian strip go all the way to Main Street and all the way down to the harbor eventually, so that we can have elegant streets that blend for people and not cars. And you certainly,
This can be an inspiration for further
yeah,
development of that
Absolutely.
stretch.
I think you've hit on what the redevelopment district is requiring and found a way to do it on a very difficult site. So
But the
congratulations.
landscaping along that side, the right-hand side,
Yeah, that's a great improvement too.
yeah, that includes trees, not just bushes, but
Right.
trees.
Right.
And across the front, it will be a big help. And the buffer at the back, putting it all the way at the back before the slope downwards, huge improvement all around.
So we'll look for a positive motion in a few weeks.
May 14th. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, planning board discussion, applicant Nature's Remedy special permit. This is still on hold, is that correct?
If I may, yes, the applicant has requested an extension, a continuance, and has granted us an extension as well. So we are continuing this until May 14th.
Is that- We need a motion for that?
We always do.
No, pardon me, the 28th.
28.
Oh,
Well, question. His letter says continues to May 28th.
Yeah, I just corrected myself after she corrected myself. Thank you, Chair.
So which is
The 20th.
28th.
28th?
So we need a motion.
Are they gonna extend the deadline to the 20th?
Deadline's been extended as well.
but this says June
So
28th.
moves.
Well, we have two things here, though, that we need to accept that they're requesting a continuance, but that also the decision.
First
Change to
this, then
28,
that.
but to make a decision through June 20.
So are you moving the continuance as well? Both?
Yes.
So moved, okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Very good. Next thing on the agenda is some modest changes on Blue Flag Development, revisions to the site plan.
If I may.
You may. Basically, they're just making things smaller. This is really modest, and I think we could do it administratively, but they got pictures, so we'll look at them.
It's interesting, I drove up there and drove all around. That's a tough site.
Yeah,
That is a really,
it's a good thing they're leaving it the way it is, huh? Can you imagine trying to do paving and drainage and everything on that site?
nope.
So I have about 21 pages of plans, but this one sheet shows those changes,
All in one, please.
all in one.
Good.
So, change number one, the approved, the maintenance shed. So they would like to make the maintenance shed smaller. They've looked and saw what their needs are, and they want to change the maintenance shed from 1,980 square feet to 936 square feet in the same location. So reducing from 1,980 to 936 square feet. Here at the club, we're all very excited about the prospects for a hot tub. However, with the grading of the property and things like that, the hot tub needs to go because there's about a 13-foot, there's a significant drop at the grading right here, and to build that decking and footing and things like that, what they'd like to do is shift the clubhouse 13 feet to the north. So the clubhouse is going to remain the same, the hot tub is going away, but it's going to shift 13 feet further to the north. And that is the extent of the changes. Maintenance shed smaller, building stays the same, shifted 13 feet, hot tub is toast.
And that's it, right?
That is it.
Can I make a motion that these changes be handled administratively?
Yes.
Second.
Any further discussion? All set? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Thank you. Moving right along, general correspondence. Here's the report. Do we have any? Any new general correspondence? I don't see the purple folder.
So, you may also note, and this is that, and I know I sound soft every time I say about how having a meeting a week after a meeting is tough on the staff sometime. The agenda should include announcements, but we didn't make that change. So I'm willing to take it on the chin if anybody has an announcement to make.
Oh,
Through the
I got
chair.
one.
Through the chair, I'm responsible for not having it on there. And
I wouldn't dare.
I apologize.
Well, I think we all agreed to have announcements. So, is that,
We did.
It's a matter of.
We
public
did, and we voted
it's a
on
matter
it.
of public record.
That's right.
Jim,
I have an announcement. On the Friends of Falmouth Station, we're having an event on May 12th. We're gonna have Tom Cahere and John Kennedy come and talk about the history of railroading on Cape Cod and the future of railroading on Cape Cod, which includes possible extension to commuter service to Hyannis and the bridge. There's a lot of things. These two gentlemen know everything about trains, and they're coming and giving a presentation. And we're gonna have some music and refreshments served. It's only 2 hours, a little quick history thing. To have a 501c3, you've gotta have a reason and have a historic reference to railroading on Cape Cod is in our charter. So this is one of the events that we're gonna have as part of the Friends of Falmouth Station. We invite everybody to come.
May 12th, 3 to 5.
May 12th, 3 to 5.
At the station?
It's at the station. It should be fun. These performers are great. We've had them once, and they do railroad songs, and you can keep that.
Thank
Is
you.
there a reason why that's not in the PDF, so we can't see it up there?
It's just an announcement. I'll get to make it a couple times, John. I'll have it up there. I'll have it there the next time.
John,
Go
take a
right the
picture with
next
your
time.
phone. Take a picture with your phone, then you'll have it.
I can
Okay.
remember it.
Okay.
Tough crowd.
Any other announcements, or,
Just don't forget, tomorrow night is our
party.
town board dinner,
yes, potluck dinner? That'd
town
be
board
great.
social.
That's tomorrow.
That's tomorrow.
At the yacht club.
At 5.
See how many dribs and drabs
Well,
at
Understand we're gonna have clams.
We are having, well, the planning board is in charge of
Providing
the clams.
We thank Mr. Fox.
Well, you all kicked in a little bit. It actually cost a little, the clams were $100.
Oh, you need a little bit more.
No, we'll talk, I'm all set. It's just the
Well,
seafood's
I
gone
wasn't
up.
here, so mine is yet to come. That might
So,
tip
Doug-
over the top.
Doug
we
Brown
need
was there buying
$75
fish, and
to
his
make
bill
that
was
work.
even higher. The selectman, he was making, the selectmen are doing, cooking fish for
Fish,
everybody.
kidding.
So it's gonna be a fun night.
Of course it will.
Any other future agenda items? Let's talk about this. You can go first.
Are we done with announcements? Did you?
Yeah,
No, I'm
another
moving on to
announcement?
agenda items.
Go ahead.
Is that okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
Okay. Some time ago, Pat and I brought up design standards.
yes.
And now that we're past town meeting, we were going to get to some other things, and it would be good to have that on the agenda. We had handed out, but we'll do it again. And since then, I found that the state has some model design standards that I will send to Tom for all of us to take a look at. So there's an agenda item.
With homework.
Yeah. And our regular one, where's the multifamily bylaw? We know it's coming. Just like to give it a little assist.
We haven't really separated it out from the Davis Straits. We've kind of incorporated in Davis Straits, but it should be
It
separate.
should be separate, and now we have the suggestions that were given to us in the housing production plan.
Yes.
So that I guess our first step would be looking at those suggestions in tandem with the draft Pat and I put together of suggested standards to see where that gets us.
So can we have a discussion, actually a draft for a multifamily district?
We can.
We'll give you some time. I know we've got a lot on the agenda. It just needs to be something that happens in a few spring, guys,
This
before
spring.
summer.
Right,
Okay? You'll work it out.
okay, that's,
We're the committee reports to the meeting.
Right,
too.
right. Does anyone, we didn't have, but do you have one? That was,
Oh, it's not on the agenda.
okay, thanks for bringing it up.
You're asking about future agenda.
Yes.
items. I'm saying
Yeah.
committee report should
Right.
be a
Co-
future
yeah.
agenda. item.
That should
Right,
be on there. every-
absolutely.
I think
It's
that
gonna
should
be on every
every,
one, so that, in case things pop up. Anything else, future agenda? items? Well, let's talk about, no, he hasn't come again tonight, but when are we gonna talk about, the point I wanted to make, I've been getting emails from people about things they want on the agenda. I keep telling them that we really don't discuss our business in emails. We do it in open meeting at this meeting, and that's what we need to do. We are going to be talking about what is it, not the needle exchange, the medical facilities changes. But before we have a discussion on it, I've asked you to have the town council weigh in and say, yes, we need to do this, or no, you don't have the right to do that. I don't want to have a whole blown-out discussion and then be told we shouldn't be doing it anyway. So it's kind of, I think last week I did ask you,
So,
and so get us a letter, and then we get it on the agenda.
so today, in between town council's interviews for associate town council, because I talked to Frank about that, that we need to carve out some time to work on this. So Frank said, you are correct. So we are working on carving out some time between his interviewings for his associate town council and the other things in his day job, because he has a very busy day job as
So
well.
when that happens, then you will bring up this
Correct.
on an agenda item after we have him weigh in.
Correct. We got a request from Mr. Halen to present his article at a planning board meeting. I talked to Frank about looking at that and looking at the other references that were put together. So we have a very constructive conversation. We have that conversation. So town council, Frank and I talked about that today, about getting that time together and setting that up. So to be discussed with council and to put together a package for that future date.
So we will have a future agenda item on that.
So the question is that a zoning issue? I mean, to me, that's first and foremost. Is a needle exchange facility, does that require a zone to accommodate it?
Well, I think at this point, we're veering off the future agenda item.
Yes,
But
you're-
that's the nature of the question.
That's what I'm
Yes.
asking.
Because as I've talked about before, we have zoning for retail, but we don't have zoning for selling Frisbees and selling, puppy chow.
Right.
It's retail. We have
Right.
business, zoning for offices, but not business zoning for doctor's offices and lawyers' offices.
Exactly.
So they're sort of broader categories, so how do you parse that out? And can you parse that out? How does that go
So
about?
we've asked town council to weigh in on that and
Right.
then have an agenda item, if in fact he directs us to go that way.
Right. I
We
mean,
don't know.
No, to me, it's either, yes, it's a zoning issue,
Or
or
no, it
no,
isn't.
it's not a
Right.
zoning
So
issue.
that's basically the same. You're right.
Just checking.
That's what I was looking for. Next meeting, April 30th,
3:00.
3 o'clock, here.
And their next registered meeting, May 14th.
And I don't see anything else on the agenda.
Move to
So,
adjourn.
move to adjourn.
Adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
I think we got